You know, in physics, there's this fundamental principle that nature absolutely abhors a vacuum.
Right. It just won't allow empty space to stay empty.
Exactly. Like if you pump all the air out of a sealed chamber, the surrounding atmospheric pressure doesn't just politely ignore that empty space. It does everything it possibly can to violently force its way back in.
Yeah, the space basically demands to be filled.
It does, and it gets filled by whatever is closest and under the most extreme pressure. And today we are watching that exact physics equation play out, but on a global theological scale. We're looking at a world that has just suffered the ultimate power vacuum.
Which is a massive shift. According to the timeline in our source text, we're currently living in what is designated as the third eon, or, the present evil eon.
Right.
It's an era defined entirely by mortal misrule. And it's a period that originally kicked off just after the biblical flood. But the sources point to this sudden, massive rupture in the status quo.
The snatching away.
Yes, the snatching away of the body of Christ, also known as the ecclesia. So suddenly, those who held to the truth they're removed from the board.
Which leaves this staggering void. So the ultimate question for you, listening to this deep dive, is what happens to the world that gets left behind? We're going to trace the deeply chaotic events that spiral out of this sudden emptiness.
From the rise of a terrifying political figure to a literal shift in cosmic geography.
Yeah, leading straight into this explosive threshold that just forcefully slams the door on the third eon entirely. So, okay, let's unpack this. What is the immediate psychology of the world right after this snatching away?
Well, logically, you might assume that an event of this
You have
magnitude...
billions of people vanishing.
Right, exactly. You'd think the sudden disappearance of the faithful would bring humanity to its knees, like a mass awakening where society realizes, wow, we missed the truth, we need to surrender to divine authority.
I mean, you would think fear alone would drive some kind of global repentance.
Yeah, but instead of humanity humbling itself, the sources reveal that human misrule actually doubles down. The texts referred to this resulting era as Man's Day.
Man's Day.
Right, and man absolutely refuses to voluntarily hand over the government to the Messiah. Humanity actually reaches the arrogant peak of its own misrule.
I'm just trying to understand the psychology there. How does a society experience this miraculous, traumatic void and then respond with more rebellion?
It's fascinating. The texts describe humanity in this eon as being relentlessly focused on improving their immediate physical condition, their burden, their suffering, and they want immediate relief from their earthly troubles.
They want a quick fix.
Exactly. They have absolutely zero interest in waiting for some promised future bliss through God's anointed. So when you have a society gripped by the terror of a sudden vacuum, they become incredibly vulnerable. They'll follow anyone who promises that quick fix.
It's kind of like a rebellious crew taking over a ship when the captain mysteriously steps away.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Like, they've got no navigator, the compass is gone, and they're drifting in these really dangerous waters. But instead of calling out for help, or, trying to find the original course, they hold a panic election.
And they choose the loudest mutineer on deck.
Exactly. They pick the guy who promises them smooth sailing, extra rations, and total freedom today, and they just completely ignore the massive iceberg waiting in the dark ahead.
And that loudest mutineer is identified in these texts as the man of lawlessness, the Antichrist or the false Christ. And what's fascinating here is that he doesn't take over by brute, tyrannical military force alone.
He doesn't.
No, his primary weapon, his core identity in these sources is that of a deceiver. He basically weaponizes humanity's desire for immediate relief. He promises health, wealth, and earthly happiness right now.
So he gives them this localized artificial paradise. He fills the vacuum by offering the exact false peace that their fleshly desires are just screaming for.
Yeah, but there's a massive catch.
The spiritual cost.
Exactly. This leader absolutely does not confess Jesus. He ultimately demands worship for himself in place of God. So he provides the earthly solutions humanity is begging for. But the price of admission is total spiritual subjection to a false deity.
Which, that makes sense on a political level, but for one individual to consolidate that much global traction so quickly,
Yeah.
it feels like there has to be a deeper mechanism at play. He isn't operating in a vacuum, is he?
Not at all.
It seems like he's the physical puppet of a much larger cosmic strategy.
You're hitting on the invisible architecture of the third eon here.
Yeah.
The texts are very clear that the ultimate adversary, Satan, is the one actually running this operation. In fact, Satan is explicitly called the god of this eon.
Wait, really? The god of this eon?
Yes. He holds sweeping authority over almost all of humanity. He sways the human spirit and operates within the minds of what the text calls the sons of stubbornness, intentionally blinding them to the truth.
Okay, let me pause you there, because that phrase, god of this eon, is fascinating. We usually picture the adversary operating out of some, like, subterranean fiery cave, right?
Oh, right. The classic pitchfork imagery.
Yeah. But that's not where his headquarters are, according to this timeline.
Not at all. According to these sources, Satan currently operates his vast schemes of opposition from headquarters in the air, among the celestials.
In the air, wow.
Yeah, he's running a massive top-down hierarchy of spiritual forces from a position of elevated cosmic geography.
But right as this Antichrist figure is gaining total control on Earth, the adversary experiences a catastrophic downgrade.
A major one, yeah.
Because the text outlines this massive cosmic conflict. Michael, the chief messenger, wages war in the celestials and literally expels Satan and his messengers from heaven.
Right, he's cast down out of the air.
Entirely stripped of his celestial jurisdiction and confined strictly to the Earth.
Which is the pivotal turning point for the entire planet.
Wait, I need to push back on the mechanics of this, though. If Satan is literally designated as the god of this eon and he possesses this sweeping authority, how does he just get kicked out of his own domain by Michael?
That's a great question.
Like, doesn't he own the territory? How does a subordinate messenger just evict the god of the eon?
Well, it comes down to the strict boundaries of the eons themselves. Satan's title as god of this eon doesn't mean he's secretly omnipotent or autonomous. It means he's been granted a specific temporary role to act as the chief adversary.
Oh, so it's temporary.
Exactly. The theology here posits that God actually requires this opponent to fully display the superiority of divine wisdom and power. But, eons have expiration dates.
Right.
So when Michael expels Satan, it isn't some random coup. It's the universe's alarm bell ringing. It signals the third eon is ending. His lease on the Celestials is basically up.
Ah, so it's literally an eviction notice served by the landlord, and Michael is just the one delivering it. But think about the sheer physics of that event. You're taking all of this massive, universally distributed spiritual opposition, this entire dark hierarchy that was previously operating in the vastness of the air, and you're suddenly compressing all of it directly onto the surface of the Earth.
And that confinement acts as a massive accelerant. It supercharges the chaos. I mean, you have a furious, cornered adversary who knows his time is short, and he's driving the Antichrist deception to its absolute frenzied peak.
Wow.
This compression is the catalyst for the final judgments that follow.
It creates the ultimate pressure cooker. So Satan is cast down to earth. He's furious and confined. The Antichrist is in absolute power, deceiving the nations with false promises. The pressure is building to an explosive degree.
Right.
But the sources are incredibly careful to emphasize that the end of this eon is not just someone flipping a light switch to plunge the world into the next era. It's a distinct, highly specific process.
Yeah, and the linguistics here really reveal the underlying mechanics. The texts make a strict distinction between two words: the consummation of the eons and the conclusion of an eon.
Okay, what's the difference?
The consummation is the absolute final end of all eons, way down the timeline. But what we're looking at here, at the violent end of the third eon, is a conclusion.
And the word they use for conclusion translates more accurately to a together finish, right?
Yes.
It implies a gathering, like a drawing together of multiple threads.
Ah.
The sources actually explicitly compared this specific period to a harvest.
And a harvest is a profoundly fitting metaphor because it explains why this takes time. You don't just blink and magically transport the wheat into the barn.
No, it's a whole process.
Right, it's a protracted agricultural season. You have to cut the crops, gather them in the field, thresh them, winnow them, and painstakingly sort the good grain from the weeds. Basically, humanity is being processed.
And that sorting process is vividly described in the end-time judgments. Like, the texts reference the parable of the dragonet, which pulls in all kinds of fish from the sea that have to be individually sorted on the shore.
Right.
But the really striking one is the parable of the darnel of the field. I mean, what exactly is darnel, and why is it so crucial to understanding this specific timeline?
Well, darnel is a type of weed, but it possesses a very dangerous characteristic. In its early stages of growth, it looks almost identical to actual wheat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you cannot easily tell them apart. If you try to uproot the darnel early, you risk destroying the genuine wheat along with it.
Because the roots are tangled?
Exactly. So you're forced to let both grow together until the harvest. Only when they're fully mature, when the head of the grain actually appears, does the difference become obvious.
Which explains the why behind the timing. The deception under the Antichrist is so pervasive and so masterfully disguised as this genuine golden age that the true believers and the deceived are just growing side by side. Harvest season is the time when the fruit of human misrule fully matures, making it undeniably clear who has followed the deceiver and who has remained faithful.
And that maturation of evil forces a separation. Once the sorting is complete, the valuable grain is secured. But, agricultural harvesting inevitably leaves you with the chaff and the darnel, the poisonous weeds.
Right.
And in the parables, there's only one way to dispose of the darnel.
You have to burn it, which perfectly explains how the harvest leads directly into that terrifying threshold called the day of indignation, or the day of wrath. The sorting necessitates a burning.
Exactly. The day of indignation serves as the definitive boundary line of the timeline. In the grand symmetry of these eons, the major eras are separated by massive cataclysms.
Like the flood.
Right. The second eon was separated from our current third eon by the global deluge. Now, to separate the third eon from the promised peace of the fourth eon, another absolute barrier is required.
But this time, the mechanism isn't water, it's fire. The day of indignation acts as this fiery, cleansing demolition. It forcefully tears down the human misrule that has corrupted the earth.
Yes.
It brings man's day to a violent, definitive halt, burning away the chaff of the Antichrist's false kingdom.
The necessity of this fire really comes down to foundation. You simply cannot build the perfect divine justice of the fourth eon on top of the rotten, corrupted structure of the third.
That makes total sense.
The earth has to be physically and structurally purged. The day of indignation isn't portrayed as just some random outburst of divine anger. It's a calculated, necessary demolition of a condemned building so that true reconstruction can finally begin.
But wait, if the earth is physically purged by this fire, how do we guarantee the spiritual corruption doesn't just sprout right back up in the ashes? I mean, we can wipe out the human misrule, we can dethrone the Antichrist, but the puppet master, the adversary who is cast down to earth, he's still there. You can't rebuild the house if the arsonist is still walking around the property.
That is the exact issue. Which brings us to one of the most vivid and consequential moments in the entire source text. To truly transition into the fourth eon, the root cause of the deception must be entirely neutralized.
Right.
The text describes an angel descending out of heaven carrying two highly specific items. The key to the abyss, which is described as the submerged chaos, and a massive chain.
The imagery there is incredibly visceral. This angel just lays hold of the dragon, the ancient serpent, the devil, Satan, and binds him for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
He's cast directly into the abyss, the door is locked, and a divine seal is placed over him.
And the stated purpose for this binding is crucial. The text says, lest he should still be deceiving the nations. His primary weapon, the very tool he used to elevate the Antichrist and blind humanity, is completely removed from the board.
You know, when I was reading through the source notes on this binding, a massive question popped into my head.
Oh yeah, what was it?
Well, you lock up the ultimate boss, sure. But Satan didn't get kicked out of the Celestials alone. He was cast down to earth with a massive army of subordinate messengers, the demonic forces. Does locking up the general really stop the army from fighting?
It absolutely does. And the sources reveal a fascinating mechanism about the nature of evil within this specific theological framework.
Okay.
Satan's subordinates do not possess independent, autonomous power. They are entirely 100% dependent on him for their authority and their ability to operate.
Oh, wow. So it operates exactly like a massive global botnet of infected computers in a cyber attack.
That's a perfect analogy.
Like you might have millions of individual devices causing chaos, setting spam, and launching attacks all over the world, but they're all receiving their instructions and their operational capability from one single command and control server.
Right.
The moment you locate that main server and pull the plug, the moment you bind Satan in the abyss, every single infected computer in the network instantly goes dormant. The entire structure just collapses simultaneously.
Exactly. Once his personal authority is withdrawn and sealed in the abyss, all opposition from those spiritual forces simply ceases. They are utterly deprived of the power to oppose.
That's incredible.
The transmission of deception is jammed right at the source. The airwaves, spiritually speaking, are finally clear.
The static is gone, And it's the specific event, this cosmic unplugging, that officially clears the stage and births the fourth eon, which is widely known as the millennium. With the deception neutralized and the Earth purged, humanity steps into a radically different reality.
And the fourth eon is the era the texts point toward with profound anticipation. The kingdom of this world finally becomes the Lord's. Christ takes the throne, not as a passive observer, but ruling with an iron rod.
Which signifies absolute justice, right?
Exactly. Unwavering righteousness and the immediate correction of any wrong. It is the divine government that humanity refused to wait for during the power vacuum of the third eon.
And the geopolitical structure of the Earth shifts completely, too. Israel is positioned as a kingdom of priests, administering the earth and acting as the direct mediators between God and the nations.
Yeah.
The environment itself is cleansed, the deceiver is locked away, and the planet experiences 1,000 years of untainted, flourishing peace.
We've traced a remarkable, deeply intricate arc today. I mean, the architecture of this timeline is brilliant in its cause and effect.
It really is.
The sudden snatching away of the ecclesia creates a terrifying power vacuum. Humanity, desperate for immediate earthly relief, embraces the false fleshly promises of the Antichrist. Meanwhile, the expiration of the third eon triggers a cosmic war, resulting in Satan being cast down from the celestials, which compresses all that spiritual opposition onto the earth.
Right.
And this intense pressure cooker forces the protracted harvest season, the slow, careful separation of the genuine wheat from the deceptive darnel. The burning of that darnel manifests as the fiery day of indignation, purging the physical earth.
And finally, the ultimate source of deception is chained in the submerged chaos, neutralizing his entire demonic network and ushering in the flawless administration of the fourth eon. It's just a breathtaking sequence, moving from the absolute depths of human arrogance to the perfect restoration of divine order. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over.
Okay.
We just spent a lot of time exploring how absolutely crucial it is that Satan is locked in the abyss. That divine seal is the ultimate guarantee of 1,000 years of peace, right? A world totally free from deception.
Yes.
But the source texts explicitly state that when those 1,000 years are finished, Satan must be loosed for a little time.
It creates an incredible theological paradox.
It really does. If the fourth eon brings about a perfectly restored world, administered by flawless divine rule with an iron rod, a society that has known nothing but absolute peace, prosperity, and justice for a millennium. Why on earth would a flawless society require the adversary to be unchained one last time? If nature abhors a vacuum, what kind of hidden spiritual vacuum could possibly still exist after 1,000 years of paradise? A vacuum that only the ultimate deceiver can expose.
That is quite the question.
It's definitely something for you to explore on your own. Thank you for bringing such complex, deeply thought-provoking material to the table. Until next time, keep diving deep.